Welcome to a Trekzone conversation where we dive into science fiction. Today, an episode years in the making. A dedicated Axanar supporter is beaming in. Reece Watkins, thanks for being here, my friend.
Oh, thanks for inviting me, Matt.
This is a Trekzone conversation. And you can get exclusive behind-the-scenes info and first-play access to all Trekzone podcasts by becoming a member today. Click join on every Trekzone video on YouTube. Go to the trek.zone/support or scan the QR code on screen throughout the show. Now, it's back to you, Matt.
Well, thank you very much, Ross. And don't forget our socials. Find Trekzone on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and your favourite podcast feed. Like, follow, and subscribe to help us convince the algorithm we're worth promoting. Reece, how did you find out about Axanar and what excites you about it?
Well, way back in the dim time, I believe it was in early 2014. I was a fan of James Cawley's Star Trek New Voyages Phase 2. And he mentioned that a friend of his, Alec Peters, was doing a Kickstarter for a new fan film. And I didn't really expect much from it, but I kicked in my $25 and waited like the rest of us. And then when it actually dropped after several hours of delay on launch day, I was blown away. I genuinely thought it was the best 20 minutes of Star Trek produced in the past 20 years. Now that would be 25 years, and I still stand by that statement. It was phenomenal. I mean, you could see the quality from frame one. My jaw dropped when I saw it. So I said, I could not believe that this was done by amateurs. Obviously, everyone was involved was, well, if not a professional, they had some experience with it. So I said, I want to be a part of this. I had done some previous internet videos before, but it was mostly just Halo machinima on the forums of the old Red versus Blue Rooster Teeth thing. And that was fun. So I thought I knew something about it, but nothing on this scale. So I set about trying to get in touch with Alec Peters and see how I could help.
And do you believe it was Alec that was the driving force behind Axanar and still is to this day?
Well, there's no doubt that he is he really is the driving force behind Axanar. It was his idea. He's the one that's kept it going long past when most people would have given up with it. Especially considering all of the hurdles that he had to clear, including the CBS lawsuit. But it's always been a team effort. Alec has tried to find the best people he could, and he's certainly done that. And from time to time, they've departed the production for one reason or another. Some of them completely legitimate. Some of them, well, everybody has their own personal reasons. So I'm optimistic about the future.
Now, when you see people like Christian Gossett and Robert Meyer Burnett from these early days, from the Prelude times, leaving the show and making the comments that they do, did that give you any sort of pause? Does that give you any sort of pause as to what's going to happen with Axanar?
It did. It's always easy to jump in and completely lose sight of reality, especially with a project that was absolutely huge. You were around back in the 2014 time period, and up until the lawsuit dropped, Axanar was the hottest thing going, and it was really more of a friendly rivalry at that time, because everybody, James Cawley, Vic Mignogna with Star Trek Continues, they were all trying to leapfrog each other, and it was nothing but good, because every time that one of them did better than the others, all the Trek fans profited. Benefited, we'll say that. Yeah, CBS is still kind of iffy about profits, and rightly so.
Not profit, benefit.
Yeah, benefit. Yeah. So, it used to be said that, well, to paraphrase an old joke, Trek is like pizza. Even when it's bad, it's good. And this was good, and it was all good fan films. And usually, good in fan film was sort of an oxymoron. But now it was getting great, and people were jumping on the bandwagon. People were contributing, donating, and I think that the original prelude to Axanar Target was $10,000, and Alec wound up taking in $100,000, over $100,000. So fantastic. But to get back to your question, so I wanted to be a part of it. I would have loved to have written some episodes for it, but you know what they say, it's never meet your heroes, because you may not like what you find. So before I jumped in with both feet, so to speak, I actually met Alec at Treklana in 2015. We went out to lunch, and he asked if I'd work at the Axanar booth, and I said, sure, of course, anything to help out. But I was really keeping my eye on him, because I was kind of expecting to find he has one face for the public and then turns around and completely is a different person behind their back. And strangely enough, that's not the case. I know that Alec rubs a lot of people the wrong way, but the one thing you can't say about Alec Peters is that he's insincere. If he hates you, he hates you. But if he likes you, he likes you. And there's no, there's no beating around the bush. There's no nice to your face and stab you in the back type thing. So when I didn't see any of that in that weekend at Treklana, I said, okay, maybe Alec is the real deal. And so far, the past 5 years, he's maintained that consistent integrity with me. Now, I know other people may have problems with him, and I just, I've always told Alec, the first time I catch you lying to me, I'm out the door, and I'm still here. I followed the lawsuit with very great attention. I read everything that came out, said, okay, if he's hiding something, if he's trying to slip something by, it'll be in the depositions, it'll be in the discovery, everything that CBS with their $1 million lawsuit and their investigators, if they're going to find something, I'm going to find out, and then out the door. I'm still here. The more I got into it, the more, and this was about the time when a lot of consternation and uproar came out over the internet about, oh, well, Alec was warned and he told them no. I was like, well, no. Alec was very consistent in what he'd said, and absolutely nothing that CBS proffered in their complaint contradicted anything he said. So, despite the fact that it should be, if he was a scam artist, he was trying to pull a fast on us. Now, CBS couldn't find it, and I couldn't find it, and here we are. So I have no doubt that, people have had different experiences with him. And Alec and I have had our disagreements. But like I said, when it comes right down to it, there's nothing that I've found where he has been less than truthful to me. So obviously I wasn't party to every single conversation. A lot of these were out on the West Coast. But things like the dispute with Christian Gossett, I've read the court documents. Like I said, I wasn't there. All I can do is relay things that I found out third hand. So I don't want to cast aspersions on anyone. Robert Burnett, however, I have great respect for. I personally think that his editing of Prelude to Axanar was the thing that was the most unsung heroics of the whole shoot. Having done a little bit of video editing myself, it's not at all easy. And it takes a professional like Rob Burnett to make it look effortless. So when the settlement came down and Alec was no longer able to make Axanar as a 2-hour movie, but Rob said, well, that's what he really wanted to direct. I thought there was an amicable split. And I have, I've spoken with Rob on several occasions since then. And, I think of all the people who've departed Axanar, that was one that hurt the most, because I think he, more than anybody else, really knew what Axanar was and was really in sync with Alec. And when it couldn't be what he had signed on for, he left. And, I can't fault him for that.
I know we're talking a lot about Alec, and I'm getting your opinion on Alec instead of speaking to the man direct, but that's sort of where we're at with this show and sort of looking at Axanar itself. And Alec is the public face of that. What do you make of some of his behavior on social media, where it's quite direct in responding to what he calls haters? It's quite direct in attacks, and even to the extent of the lawsuits that he files, he's quite litigious. What do you make of all of that? Do you sort of wish that he'd just knuckle down and get on with the films, or do you think he's got a right place where he's sort of sitting with everything?
I guess you'd really have to know him for as long as I have now. The Alec that you see on the internet is not at all the Alec you see in real life. But you also have to understand that the man has been attacked constantly for the past 5 years plus. Some people have somewhat legitimate concerns. They're concerned that, well, I donated a bunch of money and I don't see anything for it. Well, you can talk to CBS about that. But there are other people who have made it their cause in life to cause Alec a bunch of grief. And at first, it's easy to laugh him off as haters. But when it's just relentless over the past 5 years, it takes its toll on anybody. And so, I said earlier that Alec was very direct. Yeah, he is. And it seems like there's very few people who haven't made up their mind already about Alec. And that's, I guess it's more just the sad state of the internet today. But most of the things that have been said that I have seen are not even close to the truth. So I feel he's my friend, and I feel like he's gotten a raw deal. Do I wish he'd stick to facts and high ground arguments? Yeah, I wish he did. But seeing all the stuff he's gone through, I can't really fault him too much for being on the wrong side of courtesy.
Reece, have you ever watched Alec's live streams in Axanar Confidential or Trek After Dark, or even some of the stuff that he says online, and thought, wait a minute, he said something totally different a few weeks ago?
I tend not to watch them very much because it's a lot of the times it's information I've already been made aware of. I can't really comment on something I haven't seen.
What about when things are discovered, or when Alec does say things and it contradicts something else that he said a few weeks earlier? Do you sort of, where does that sort of sit? If you have seen any of that sort of contradictory comments from Alec in terms of where money's gone, what people have done, even to the degree of people leaving the production as well, reasons for leaving the production and stuff like that. Stuff, over time that's the story's sort of changed a little bit. So one example would be, say, Tony Todd leaving the production in how that was sort of handled, with Christian as well. The stories of the studio space, the changing of whether it was Alec or it was Christian who wanted the warehouse to convert into a studio, things like that.
Okay. Well, that's kind of a case of there's two sides to every story. The Tony Todd bit, the information I have was that Tony wanted more money than they had in the budget to reprise his role. And that was something that Alec couldn't pay. If there's anything more to that, that's just the information that I have about it. The controversy over whose idea the studio was, again, I wasn't part of the conversation. But looking back at the time, it made much more sense to spend money on having a studio where more fan films could be shot, because there wasn't one. And to my knowledge, there still isn't one on the West Coast. And since Alec was in the greater Los Angeles area, none of that stuff was going to be cheap. So it was either build an amazing set and then have to break it all down, store it until they could create Axanar 2, if there was ever going to be such a thing, pull it all back out, find a new set, a new studio space to wheel all of the stuff back in. Hopefully it wouldn't get damaged in the move, but things always do. So as far as a business decision to make the studio, it was, to me, that was proper stewardship of the money. Have some place that West Coast fans, which there are tons, could make their own fan films and, charge them for electricity, part of the rent. I know that the studio they had out in LA was costing them $13,000 a month in rent. And that's a big reason, or a big money sink for where a lot of the money went when CBS had their lawsuit. $13,000 a month can't just come out of nowhere. So, but as far as Alec shifting gears, I haven't really seen that. Apart from just, everybody may remember things differently or speak, say one thing one day, then contradict himself the next. I haven't really seen anything that I would consider to be willful deceit on his part.
Let's talk about the main lawsuit from 2016. It went on for 12 months with Alec fighting along the way to reach a settlement with CBS and Paramount. Do you think Alec should have fought that lawsuit, or do you think that he should have settled in the beginning, looking at CBS and Paramount as the owners of Star Trek, and if they say something that he should do it, or do you think it was right for him to push the point, as it were?
Well, that actually goes to rebut one of the biggest falsehoods about Alec, was that he was a con artist. Because if you think about it, when the lawsuit dropped it was the end of December 2015, and we were all shocked because we thought filming would start in the spring. But if he really was a scam artist, that was the perfect time for him to just go to the donor and say, oh, well, we got sued. Sorry, I can't do anything. He could have just completely knuckled under to CBS and pocketed the $250,000 he still had in the account. He didn't do that. There's been times when I still kind of wonder why he goes through all of the grief he gets from the haters to make this thing that's dragged out for 5 years. But, he's one of the most determined people I've ever met. He's going to get this done. I don't know if I would have done it after that. But should Alec have settled at the start? Well, it's kind of easy to armchair quarterback that, or it's a lot of people are very angry over what happened. But I've said in the past, now we know. I mean, CBS came out with the guidelines during this. We didn't have them before. A lot of people are upset with it. A lot of people say, well, that killed fan films, but it didn't. I mean, we still have fan films going to this day. Yes, they have, they're not 2-hour epics. But, now everybody knows the playing field they've got to work within to avoid being sued. So, I know that's small consolation to people who had big plans for a large film and they feel that Alec was responsible for it. But, if it hadn't been Alec, it was going to be somebody. So I kind of find it hard to fault him for fighting the lawsuit, especially when he got a top IP legal firm to represent him pro bono in it. And it really could have gone all the way to the Supreme Court. So, no, I don't really think he was wrong to fight it.
All right, well, let's move on to the social media, and we've talked about them a little bit. We focused on Alec there a little bit as well, but on to the two sides of this coin. There are a couple of groups out there on the topic. Axanar, led by Carlos Pedraza, obviously is the big one that Alec terms as the hater group. Then we also have The Real Truth About Axanar, which I believe is one that you lead.
Yep.
Do you believe there are any similarities in the behavior of some in each of the groups?
The problem I see is that it's kind of a case of Axanar and others claiming, well, he hit us back first. Basically, have things gone as smoothly as this conversation is going? Very rarely. That's why the group is pretty much, at least The Real Truth About Axanar, that's what it's supposed to be, a place for people to talk about it. And, Alec posts there rather frequently, and I don't post there nearly as often as I used to, because whenever we've tried, or whenever we've clashed with the detractors in other groups, it's just run into basically Facebook flame wars. Nothing ever gets done. Everybody gets agitated, and nothing ever gets settled. So I don't really visit Axamonitor anymore. It's not, I really have a problem with its administration. I can't really figure out what Carlos Pedraza's deal is, because as far as we can tell, he never donated a cent to any of the Axanar productions. And so it's kind of difficult to see exactly what kind of axe he has to grind. But at least his behavior has been more civil than other people. And some of them have been downright, antagonistic is about the only way you can provide it. And a lot of them are former staff members of Axanar. So, I guess the real question is, well, if you have all these people and they're all saying the same thing and the common denominator is Alec Peters, well, obviously Alec's the problem. And, Occam's razor would point to that, except for the fact that you can go back and look, and again, nobody's presented any real evidence that could have Alec accused of, well, or start a lawsuit for fraud or scam or any of these other things. And a lot of that has devolved into personal attacks, which, again, neither of us is naive. It's Facebook, it's the internet. It's much easier to talk smack about somebody when you can't reach out and punch them in the face. Well, since even if you did live in the same place, you can't punch them in the face, Alec goes with the one thing that he can do, and that is find the worst offenders and see them in court. I mean, what else can you do?
I just wanted to touch on a point that you made there in your answer there, Reece, just on Carlos Pedraza's deal, even my deal to a certain degree as well. Do you think that it's only donors that should be having a problem with Alex, with the lack of Axanar at this point? Or can anyone do you think anyone should be able to sort of sit back and be able to look at it and go, well, hang on, there's a long list of promises here that we're a few years into now with no delivery?
The problem that I've seen with a lot of the people that are, for lack of a better term, Johnny-come-lately haters, is they didn't have to go through all this. The odds are they don't have the entire side of the story, or both sides of the story. And like I said, that's why I really appreciate you reaching out to me to do this, because I don't know if I'll be able to convince you that Alec Peters isn't the ogre he's made out to be. But I am glad to see that at least somebody's willing to get the other information, even if you don't believe me. I mean, that's your prerogative. But I don't begrudge anybody coming to their own decision. Some people, even at the height of Axanar's popularity, they were complaining because, it's too warlike and Star Trek's not like that. Well, some people like that. Some people don't. And that's completely up to them. That's fine. If you just don't like the whole Axanar war story, that's fine. It's completely personal opinion. But when you've got people bad-mouthing a man, most of whom have never met, and going completely off of other people who, let's face it, have reason to be disgruntled with their experience on Axanar, then we're not really in the realm of truth anymore. It's just propaganda and hatred, and that's not productive for anything. So do I think donors have a right to say, okay, well, that's fine. Where is it? Even the people who've given money over the past 5 years. Yeah, where is it? Well, part of that, and I'm sure this goes into one of your questions, comes down to what Paul Jenkins did. As you know, in October of 2019, excitement was running high again. We were finally shooting a lot of the footage for episodes 4 and 5, and we had raised another $50,000 to shoot this, and I was there at the shoot. And it was professional. People had a lot of fun doing it. It was really what fan films were supposed to be. And everybody, I purposely stayed, we had 2 warehouses at the time that were back to back, and one had the set, which had to be, kept professional and quiet and everything. So I stayed in the other one just because I still love Axanar. I still want to see what they produce. So I wasn't, I tried to stay away when they were actually filming so it wouldn't be spoiled. I mean, I'd read the script, but, and excitement was running high. Everybody had a great time. It was long hours, but it was what fan films were supposed to be. So then afterwards, we figured, okay, Paul's going to cut together a great trailer, and this will be the thing to reignite momentum for Axanar. And then it just kept getting delayed and delayed and delayed. And it moved into the new year of 2020, and we still didn't have a trailer. Like, well, or, you know, even a teaser. What's going on? Well, a trailer was finally produced, and we all went, yeah, it's good. Well, it'll be better when it's all cut together, but there was just something missing about it. There wasn't enough sizzle to the reel, as it were. And then it was a couple of months later that found out that Paul and Alec couldn't work together anymore, and Paul was let go. And then, how do I put this? At first, we thought it was going to be an amicable split, like the split with Robert Meyer Burnett was at the beginning. I mean, Rob was very professional, said, you know, it was basically down to creative differences. I can't make the movie I wanted to, so I'm stepping down so Alec can find another director, which is fine. You know, good on Rob. I still commend him for that. Paul, on the other hand, made a press release from his company, posted it on his company's webpage, and in it, well, I'm sure you can read it for yourself or what's in it, but it did not cast Alec or Axanar production in a very good light. And if it had been just another argument, you know, where Paul called him names on his personal webpage, and, you know, that's, you know, might not have been very professional, but in America, that's still, one person's opinion is not a legal problem. When you do it as a company and you directly impugn a person's professional competence, in some states, Georgia being one of them, that's what's known as defamation per se. You know, in most other libel cases, you'd have to prove that this guy's a pig head. Well, nobody can be a pig head. Nobody has the head of a pig. That's not actionable. But in certain cases, if you accuse somebody of a crime, if you accuse somebody of sexual perversion, or if you imply that someone's not professionally competent, then those are what I understand to be in a category of defamation per se. They would defame anybody as soon as you said it. So the onus to prove that it's not true, in normal libel cases, you have to prove that you're not a pig head, and then all you have to do is show up in court and say, not a pig's head, right? Then it falls on the defendant to actually prove what they said is true. Otherwise, it is defamation per se, and you can sue for damages. So that's part of the lawsuit. And that, again, the lawsuit was not Alec's first choice. Basically, he wanted to say, okay, look, take it down. We'll agree not to disparage each other. We'll just go our own separate ways. You can call it creative differences, whatever, and we'll split. Well, for some reason, only beknownst to Paul, he didn't want to go that route. So he then tried to file a copyright suit, a copyright with the U.S. Copyright Office, claiming he owned the script, which isn't true, because the first one he submitted, allegedly, contained both Alec and himself as writers, and then he filed a secondary one claiming himself as the sole writer, which was not. Anybody who'd seen the various drafts of the script, and I was like, well, yeah, a lot of this stuff was from way before Paul ever getting on the production. So that became part of the lawsuit as well. Paul countersued, and so that's kind of where it is, going back and forth in court now. But Alec has survived their motion to dismiss, so that's a good sign for him. We don't really know where it's going, but it really looks favorable for Alec to win this case. So what does that have to do with the production of Axanar? Well, they can't actually start filming again until that lawsuit's complete. Because as you know, Paul said, well, you can't use any of the footage I shot because I'm claiming ownership of it. Or, well, I don't know the exact terms he used, but that's as best as I understand it, which is kind of bizarre because the producer of a movie owns it. I don't know if you've ever, you're familiar with the term Alan Smithy. It's like, even if the director wants to distance himself from the picture, it's like, well, you can, we'll take your name off of it, but the producer paid for the footage, he owns the footage. And so right now, it turns out that a lot of the footage that was shot, Paul's producer, Scott Conley, I think. Again, I'm getting this secondhand, so I don't know from firsthand information. Apparently, there was some sort of mix-up with one of the cameras. One of the memory cards got erased, and they lost a bunch of the footage. So some of the footage, even though they shot it at the October shoot, was destroyed. Alec tells me that a lot of the other footage they use, or they had, they're not going to be able to use, whether or not Paul is successful in claiming ownership of it or not. But the bottom line is, we lost the $50,000 that we had raised for that shoot on stuff that we can't use or Paul won't let us use. And until we get that resolved, I don't think we're going to see much more progress until that's resolved one way or the other.
Well, at the time, Alec hailed the shoot as a success. Paul Jenkins did an amazing job, he said. But now Alec's calling him an amateur director. As you say, some of these problems are alleged to have occurred. Despite all that, though, the footage was shown in Vegas this weekend at the Axanar panel. Where do you sort of see that? Do you think that there is hope that it's going to be able to be used and the lawsuit will be settled, and that's why it was included in the sizzle reel on the weekend?
Well, I certainly hope so. I mean, the fans did pay for it, and anything that could be used, it may just be fill shots. But there's anything that the visual effects companies did, I'm sure that we'll be able to recycle those and get them in front, because a lot of it's pretty impressive. But at this point, I honestly don't know what they'll be able to use and what they're going to have to reshoot.
All right, Reece. Well, just one last topic that I wanted to touch on. It's called the Trollhunters group, something you're a part of. What is it, and do you see a problem with what it does?
Well, confession time. I was the guy who named it the Trollhunters group. Sue me. Not literally, it won't be. I think a lot of people get the wrong idea about what the Trollhunters group was. It doesn't exist anymore. But it was basically a place where the people who were trying to combat the misinformation with the truth would get together and share information. And Alec was a part of it. And that's, we would get insider information because, if somebody's telling lies about you, you have to have the truth to go back to. So, of course, anybody who cherry picks a bunch of guys in a room, presumably having a private conversation, is going to find some things that are not all that, they're not all that complimentary. I know Paul put one of the things in his exhibits for his counterclaim, where I said it would just be far cheaper for Alec to fly to England, find one of the most obnoxious haters, and just kick him in the crotch. Of course, this hasn't happened. It was basically said to point out that it would be ludicrous to chase down a guy in another country, in a legal system you don't even know, try to sue him, try to recover anything. You don't even know if the guy has tuppence to rub together. So it sounds awful that I said it, but yeah, I did say it. And, of course, the fellow in question has been completely unharmed, and he's going to be completely unharmed. Nobody really meant anything by it. But you say, well, it's the very idea that people are talking about people behind their back. Well, I know that for a fact this sort of thing happens out in the open on the Axon Monitor and the old CBS versus Paramount, CBS and Paramount versus Axanar group, before it went defunct. And, there's probably worse. As a matter of fact, we know that there's worse that's being said. That doesn't excuse our behavior, but the fact that we hate these guys would go away tomorrow if they just shut up and leave Alec alone. And they have no real basis for their continued abuse. And, it's a form of cyberbullying. It's a form of cyber stalking. And there's nothing to keep them in check because, we discussed earlier, you can't just punch them in the face. So, Alec's doing the only thing he can, and that's go after the worst people, sue them. And that's the only legal recourse he has. So, the Trollhunters has been painted as this evil group that's trying to get people killed. And it's no. But we have had one of our own members, Jeff Craig, who Ken Burnside talked about in one of your recent episodes. Jeff Craig had been the target of some people on Axon Monitor's abuse. They did things that were completely beyond the pale. They contacted his employer, tried to get him fired. And this isn't even Alec Peters. Where does this end? I mean, one of the most troubling things that came out of the Las Vegas convention was Sean O'Halloran sending his son to abuse Alec at his booth. I mean, it's one thing if Sean has a problem with Alec, it's fine, but teaching your children to hate? No, it's just gone too far. And I don't really see that they have any moral high ground to point the finger at the Trollhunters or anybody, because they're the ones that it's all based on their hatred of a person, most of whom have never met, and they're operating on information that's one-sided at the best and flat out false at the worst.
Do you think if the personal attacks ended, the criticism continued, but the personal attacks stopped, that this would be a lot calmer place between these two sides of the story? I look at it from a perspective, and I won't shy away from the fact that myself, on social media, not a big fan of Alec, or not a fan of Alec at all, not a fan of the way Axanar's going. I'm happy to own that. As Trekzone, having you on today, it's proof in the pudding that I'm keen on hearing both sides of the story as Trekzone, obviously painting me, and this comes back to the public face as well. Alec's the public face of Axanar, I'm the public face of Trekzone, and that's sort of where that sits. I do wonder whether if the personal attacks stopped, but the criticism continued. Obviously, that's fair game, just as Alec's right to return serve is fair game. Whether we would all be a little bit happier, I don't know whether we'd all get around the one campfire and sing Kumbaya, but I think it would certainly be a lot better place than this very antagonistic perspective.
Well, I think we can definitely agree on that, and I think there's a lot more people, including all of the troll hunters that I know, or ex-troll hunters, since the group is no longer in existence. Yeah, if we could just get down to, whether you thought, oh, that was a stupid line. No, you can't dive into a gas giant. No, you can't go warp 7 from a dead stop. These are things that have deep, heavy meaning to the people who are talking about it, but at the end of the day, have zero meaning. It's kind of like football hooliganism. Who cares if somebody wins 2-1? Well, a lot of people do, especially the people who scored 1 instead of 2. But next week it'll be something completely different, and there really shouldn't be football hooliganism, and there really shouldn't be Trek fan film hooliganism. There was a time when we were all working together. As a matter of fact, Katoomba by James Cawley had all 3 of them working together. James Cawley played Captain Kirk, Vic Mignogna directed it, and Alec Peters was involved somehow. I've forgotten which. But yeah, at one time, all 3 of them were able to work together. And I consider that to be the best episode of Phase 2 or New Voyages. But, so what? Other people may disagree with me. I'm not going to punch them in the face for it. I'd like to get to where everybody could work together. And the only thing we do have to argue about is, oh, well, the phasers should be a different color. Well, whoop-de-doo. Okay, fine. We'll make them purple for you, whatever. So, yeah, I'd like to get back to that. If I don't know what it's going to take to get us there. Hopefully, it'll be with the final release of Axanar when we can start talking about, okay, what did you like about it? What did you not like about it? Instead of, this guy's a crook, or this guy's, no, it's not productive. It's not going to solve anything. It's been 5 years, either, arrest him or move on with your lives and let him get on with it. Come back and complain when you see it.
Reece, one last thing to touch on before we wrap up. It was a post that you made in The Real Truth last week as Vegas was kicking off. It's a point in there that I just wanted to ask about because it's been a topic of discussion. You did mention former teammate Jonathan Lane. Is he still with the production, or has he moved on?
Well, no, he's taken a reduced role. Perhaps that was a bad term from it. But he used to be very hands-on, and I noticed that you called him Axanar sycophant in the Ken Burnside episode, and I don't really think that was fair. But again, that's your characterization of the situation. But no, he used to be a lot more involved in the day-to-day, the PR side of Axanar. And once he completed Interlude, he just sort of stepped back to do his own fan film thing. So I still consider him a friend of Axanar. He's just not part of the day-to-day staff that he once was.
And there's a follow-up to that as well. I forgot to mention Interlude, Jonathan's fan film. What did you think of that, given that he put it all, I think in the context of him being able to put it all together and release it in the space of about 6 to 12 months? Do you think that maybe Alec and Axanar, the full fan film, could have been done by now?
If Alec had
not for all the problems.
money, yeah, if not for all the problems, and that's sort of like apart from that, Mrs. Lincoln, how did you like the play? No, the fact that that Jonathan was able to put Interlude together in a shorter period of time, he had good people working with him. He didn't have to go through 3 different directors. I kind of feel that the question is, well, if he could do it, why can't Alec can do it? I mean, be honest with me. Is that the question? Why do we still not see Axanar? Well, it really does have to do with, financing for one thing. We're also working with the Trek actors that were allowed to, instead of pretty much unknowns. Atlanta has taken off and has become a real film mecca. A lot of the Marvel movies shoot a lot of their footage in the Atlanta area. So we had a great talent pool to pull from, but, they're not named stars yet. So we have to work around, scheduling for people like Gigi Hertzler. And I'm sure there's other particular production problems that I don't know about, the costuming, getting schedules together. But, again, Alec is not independently wealthy. A lot of people start throwing around figures like, 1.7 million. Well, I only saw 1.4 million. And he wound up losing about $36,000 on the whole thing of his own money. So it's not like Alec is independently wealthy by any means. So, he has a day job to take care of. But that's probably a very good question to ask him. And really, I know it's almost impossible. You're in Australian piece here, but you two really should sit down and see if you still feel the same way about him after you talk to him. I don't know when that could ever happen, but maybe you'll see that, yeah, he's a different person when he's not on the internet. So that's why I'm still here.
It's certainly an interview that I would love to follow up with. Obviously, Alec joined me in 2016 during the lawsuit. Famously, it didn't go down too well with him. I think I've certainly grown as an interviewer and as a person in the last 5 years. Hopefully, this is proof positive that 2 sides to the story are always there, and that I'm willing to listen. I think that.
Well, thank you, Matt. I do appreciate that.
It's certainly not on me to, and I said this to you as well, Reece, off air, and I've said it to a few people as well, that there is no point getting into a shouting match over our opposing views. We have opposing views, but we've managed to sit here for 55 minutes and chat about Axanar. I listen to your side, you listen to my side. It really is up to people watching my shows, and that's really the way that I leave it, for them to make up their own minds and find the information out as well. I'll have some links in the comments to some more detail on the things that we've talked about here as well, for people to make up their own minds. So it really is a fascinating one. It's just absolutely incredible that Axanar has developed itself into this larger-than-life thing that really has taken on a persona of itself. Reece, I really appreciate your time. Thanks for beaming into Trekzone today, and hopefully we can chat again in the future.
Thank you, Matt. All right. Thank you.